there. Welcome to the Sound Legacy Podcast. I'm Andrew Couch. My business partner, Paul Shelton, is behind the camera. And we've got a guest for you today. Her name is Dr. Linda Berry. She is a chiropractor, very gentle, a nutritionist, and found her way to healing via a rather unconventional route. You're going to hear all about it. Quite liked her as soon as I met her. I think you will too. Please visit mysoundlegacy.com to learn more about what we're doing and how we can help preserve your story. So without further ado, this is our conversation with Dr. Linda Berry. Dr. Linda Berry, thank you so much for coming to our office. Sorry I got lost, or we gave you bad directions. You can blame us. It's
No,
fine.
you gave good directions. It was Google Maps that was the problem.
I'm perfectly happy to blame Google
Yes,
all the time.
all the time.
Yeah. Well, we're neighbors, evidently. You're in the neighborhood here. So at least you didn't get lost in an unfamiliar place. It's kind of nice to get lost in a familiar place. How often do you get that?
Rare.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome then. I met you, I think, a week ago, and I just heard you asking questions in a crowded room, and I thought that is someone I have to talk to. You're asking very good questions that got the rest of the group thinking and made, I think, the speaker on stage feel more comfortable, which that was cool. So I'm really glad I did meet you because right away you told me a pretty interesting story about your life that I'd like to get to. But first, where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Queens, New York. My mother was living in Whitestone while my father was off on a Navy ship. And he was in the military, got out of Navy, went into the Air Force. So we've moved around a bit, not as much as many other people, but I had the advantage of living in Germany for a couple of years when I was a teenage girl, 13 to 15. We were on an American base, so it wasn't immersion or anything. I don't speak fluent German.
Okay.
But that was an awesome experience.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
We don't speak fluent Queens either. I don't hear any of that.
No, I got out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't grow up there.
Yeah. Where's your accent? Just
Well, if I'm angry, people tell me they can tell I'm from New York.
Yeah. That's nice. Well, so you were an Army brat or a Navy Air Force
Air Force,
brat?
Navy, yeah.
When did the Air Force start? Was it World War II when they did establish the Air Force? Or I don't know.
Oh gosh, I didn't keep up with the military stuff.
Yeah, I don't remember. I know that's not. I didn't bring you here to talk military history, but your personal history. So you moved around, and I know that you were very much a dancer, an athlete,
Yes.
like really in your body kind of person. Where did that start?
My grandparents had a house upstate New York, and the parents would sit around the living room and watch the Lawrence Welk show, if anybody remembers that. And there was a section where Bobby and Sissy would be dancing. And so they would let me stay up or get me up to watch Bobby and Sissy dancing because I would dance around the living room and entertain them all. So that was the beginning of my dancing career.
That's cool.
And then when I was in second grade, my mother's allowed me to go to dance classes. But after the first class, I couldn't find my way back home. So the bus driver, I was the last person on the bus and was like, well, where do you live? So finally I got home. So that was the end of my dancing career when I was in second grade. And then when I was in high school in Germany, actually, loved gymnastics, the uneven parallel bars. And one of the women had been a ballet dancer and she was creating a performance, choreographing a performance and asked me to dance in that with her. So there was that. And then I went to university in upstate New York and I thought I would be a biology major, but I ended that career because I just couldn't get calculus and I wasn't into growing flies on banana mush. I could just see myself in some lab with all those lights overhead and I said, no. So that's when my dancing career really blossomed and I got a Bachelor of Arts in Theater Dance from State University of New York in Binghamton, which is now called Binghamton University. Mm-hmm. And there's a dance company in town called the American Dance Asylum. And they asked me to join their troupe when one of the four principals left.
And what sort of dance? Was it modern dance or like?
Yeah, it was modern dance.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were a modern dance company.
Did you learn other types of dance like ballet?
Yeah, I got on toe
Wow.
Yeah. So when I was in the theater department, I did Afro-Caribbean, West African, tap, which I hated. It killed my
Oh,
shins.
yeah.
And then also ballet and got on toe for a little while. Yeah.
Wow. Did you have a favorite dancer? Was there somebody who was like, oh, he or she is like my idol? Did you have an Elvis?
Actually, I didn't. No.
Really?
Yeah.
Were there, I mean, I can't think of a modern dancer that comes to mind, but I don't really know any dancers.
Well, there was Merce Cunningham in the Village in New York City. He and his partner, John Cage, was a modern music composer, so they were big. And Alvin Ailey, of course, in New York City. So we were in New York, so there was a lot of New York. Yeah.
And that would have been in the late 70s, mid to late 70s?
Yeah.
Wow, I bet that was a fun scene.
Yeah, it was. There was also a spinning. I got into spinning for a while. That was really fun.
What's that?
Well, have you ever heard of the whirling dervishes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they get high by just spinning in place.
Right.
They train themselves by putting a nail on the ground and making sure they don't step on it. We didn't have that kind of training, but one of my friends auditioned for a performance that was going to have spinning in Manhattan, and they made them just spin for an hour and a half. And she did it.
Yeah.
So she got a part.
Did you get high?
Oh, yeah, you get really high.
Oh, like sort of a runner's high or just like beyond dizzy?
It's a spiritual high. It's like you become part of the cosmic swirl.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow. You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're in New York in late 70s and you're feeling it. You want to be a professional dancer.
Yeah, and so I was part of the company. We were had National Endowment of the Arts grants and performed at Brockport University, Brockport College, and in town at the Civic Center buildings. They had this big patio, area, esplanade, whatever you'd call it. And we did a performance there. And we also performed in some of the parks. And we also had we owned a Neo-Greco mansion in Binghamton, and Lois lived downstairs in the basement. I lived behind the performance space in the kitchen, and Bill and Arnie lived upstairs. So we did performances there also.
Oh, that's cool. And people would just come to your house and you would do a performance.
Yeah, our mansion.
Our mansion.
Yes,
So
yes,
please
yes.
forgive me.
Yes. And it had a sprung dance floor. Dancers like 2 layers of wood like this and a layer like that in between. So it gives
a little bit of bounce
to spare the shins.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all right, so how old are you at this point? You're 21, 22?
I'm 72.
No, sorry. I didn't mean now.
How old was I then?
In the story.
Oh, yeah. So, I graduated college 22, and I was with the company for part of my senior year in college, and then for 2 years after.
Right.
Yeah.
And did you get to travel with them much? Or
Yeah, those places that I mentioned.
yeah. And I'm trying to think like 22, 23 years old. It's tough to think of the future, what your ambition may or may not be long term. But did you have, you seem like a pretty together person. Did you have long term ambition?
I was just very much in the moment, just enjoying being with the dance company and choreographing and performing with the troupe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you felt fairly certain, though, that was your passion. That's where your life was heading.
That was my path at that point. Yeah.
So here's the turn.
Yeah.
What happened?
So one night, Bill and Arnie had rented a U-Haul van. It was after a performance run, and we were in the van. Bill and Arnie were the renters of it. They paid for it. So they were seated in seatbelts, and I was hitching a ride to go down to the city to visit friends with them. So I was in between the seats on cushions, and it was 3 a.m. in the morning, and the van, it was in March. There must have been some black ice. Arnie was driving. The van went out of control. It was 2 lanes, median here. So the van spun across the median, spun across the other, was rolling, ended up on the other side of the freeway going in the other direction. And I crashed through the windshield, which crushed my spine and cut up my face. And I had an memory of being on a gurney and being transferred from the ambulance into a hospital. It was near Liberty, New York.
How was everyone else? They were okay? They were buckled in?
Yeah, Bill and Arnie were fine.
So
yeah.
you were thrown from the vehicle.
I was thrown through the windshield, so I crashed through the windshield, yeah.
Oh,
broke the windshield with my head.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So crushed spine, major facial injuries. I mean, you're beautiful. I don't see a scar on your face. How did that, just being young?
Oh, no, there's scars. There's the Tigris and Euphrates on my forehead.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
And then there's scars here and scar here, but
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no frame of reference for that type of pain.
Well, the real blessing was that I didn't have pain. I felt very much in a state of grace.
During or after or throughout?
After, really?
I
mean, since then, I became a chiropractor. We'll get to that. But I had a patient who had the same level, the first lumbar vertebra injury as I did, breaking her spine. And she had to have a catheter in order to be able to empty her bladder. And she also had to walk with those L kind of braces. So, that night, I still tear up about it. I went home and fell down on my knees and was so grateful that I was spared that.
Yeah, I mean, I barely know you, and I'm extremely grateful that you were spared from that.
Yeah.
So take me to that moment. You wake up on a gurney. Could you move your body? No,
that was just a moment. It was just a moment, visual. And then I was out of it for a few days.
A few days.
Almost a week. They transferred me back to Binghamton Hospital. That's where I lived. And so I woke up a few days later when a neurosurgeon, I think, was asking me to move my toes.
Could you move them?
On my left leg, but not on my right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that moment? Well, what was that like as a 24-year-old to suddenly hear the extent of your injuries?
Well, they weren't talking about the extent of injury. With any spinal cord injury or any nerve injury, there's a period of time where if the nerve is just bruised, in 3 months it'll come back. And then if it's not back by a year, then it's not going to come back because the spine was crushed. It damaged the spinal cord.
My goodness. How do you repair a thing like that? I mean, what is it surgical? They have to go in and...
No, they didn't do any surgery. There were some fragments of bone in the spinal canal. The way they treated me, I was on what's called a striker frame. So it's a bed that has a part that goes on top of you so they can flip you. Because obviously with a fracture in your spine, they don't want to move you and create greater damage. And surgery could have also caused greater damage.
Wow.
So it's just a wait and see game. They don't treat it. Yeah.
So how long were you in that bed?
I was in that bed for 2.5 months. And then they started to get me up on a little platform. They gradually increased the angle because my body had accommodated to being flat. So my adrenals and my nervous system and my blood vessels needed to accommodate to be able to get blood to my head by gradually getting up. And I was in, they sent me, after that time, I started going to physical therapy within the hospital to try to get back as much as I could or to see what I had left at that point.
My goodness. I think about being stuck, and you were such an active person. We didn't even mention the fact that you were a purple belt in karate. I kind of forgot to bring that up.
That's right. Yeah.
That's no small accomplishment. That took a lot of dedication and time, and just suggests a very physical person.
Yeah.
I mean, you're already dancing a lot and spinning in a whirly dervish style, but to be stuck in your body and not able to move, where was your mind?
Well, like I said, I felt like I was in a state of grace, and the people from the dojo would come and visit me. They'd bring me stuff. My dance community, we had a large dance community. They would come. My family, of course, came up to be with me for a period of time. So there was, and the staff, the nurses were very kind. Yeah, I don't even know how I occupy myself, my mind at that point. But I remember when I was still in the hospital, they let me go out with Bill and Arnie. We had a little picnic. So it was after I was getting up and ambulating on my own to some degree. And I remember we were going 30 miles an hour, and it felt like, God, I must have taken a tab of acid or something, because the rushing by of the scenery was just
overwhelming,
incredible.
Oh my God.
And also, Arnie would take my bed and he would roll me around the halls of the hospital just so I could get some motion. Yeah.
Are these gentlemen still in your life?
Well, Arnie died, unfortunately, from AIDS in the 80s. And I have seen Bill when he's come out for performances.
Yeah.
So we spent a little time together.
He remained a dancer.
Oh, yeah. Bill T. Jones is world famous.
Oh, that's cool.
Choreographer and performer.
I wonder did they express sorrow and guilt and anguish and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I heard that Bill was very guilty. And apparently my legs were kind of hanging out of the vehicle, and he moved them, and that actually might have caused the spinal cord damage.
Wow.
Yeah, that caused me to be paralyzed. So
he carried...
I learned many years later that he felt quite guilty about that.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. So from injury to your first step, how long are we talking?
Well, there was physical therapy. I don't know, everybody's seen this on television. They get people in rehab and they've got parallel bars, and you just learn how to walk again on that. And you eventually do stairs. And I was released from the hospital with a wheelchair, also long leg braces came up to here that locked at the knee and unlocked so I could sit down. And I had 2 underarm crutches. So that was how I left. That was the status that I was in when I left the hospital. And that was after 3.5 months. Wow. I left the hospital. And my grandmother was dying at that point. So I went upstate New York, this place I told you where I'd been dancing as a 3-year-old, 2-year-old. And you had to go up the stairs. So, I would kind of crawl up the stairs, and there's a pond out in the back. So I did rehab by swimming in the pond.
Wow.
In the back. Yeah, you'd have to make sure there were no water moccasins there first. But
chase out all the water moccasins, then go.
Right, then go in. And then when I got back to Binghamton, I was still live with the dance company because, we didn't know if I was going to get everything back or not. So I was still there, and I was doing some improvisational singing, teaching some yoga. So I was in performances in that way.
But you were teaching yoga.
With improvisational singing. Yeah. And then after a year, I didn't get everything back. I still have a paralyzed right foot and some atrophy of my left thigh. So at that point, the American Dance Asylum was dissolving. So we sold the building. Bill and Arnie went down to New York City to become world famous. And Lois Welk, who was the grandniece of Lawrence Welk, who I used to dance, to Bobby and Sissy on his show. She moved up to Cornell, New York, and became an art director for the Corningware Art Center that was up there.
Boy, Lawrence Welk always cracked me up as a kid. My grandmother had all these old records and stuff. Back in the Finger Lakes, the whole thing. So I just did not expect to be talking so much about Lawrence Welk today. Sorry, I'm very easily distracted, particularly when Lawrence Welk comes up. I'm thinking about this, what you went through, and, this is the 70s. You did mention you felt like you'd taken a tab of acid. Did you have experience in psychedelics before all that happened or after?
Oh, I had a quarter of a tab of blotter acid one time, and I did some mushrooms, but nothing major.
I was going to say, your sense of equanimity and calm when describing all this just suggests you'd done some sort of work on your mind. And I don't know if that was through meditation or through...
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So when I moved to... I'm a recovering Catholic, first of all. And when I moved to California, I I had a partner, Mary Crow. We had gone to chiropractic school together, and she had a sister, Pat, who moved out here, and another sister, Chandra. And Chandra saw this poster on a telephone pole for Montauk Chia, who is a Taoist teacher. And so I went to his seminar, which was on a houseboat, and he had us doing some Qigong exercises, where we're doing something like this, and he came up and started pushing on my pinky, to see if I was holding structure. And, that was it for me. I just, it wasn't, you didn't have to learn a different language. You didn't have to go to a priest to reach God. It wasn't about any religious thing. It was just working with energy in your body. And as you could imagine, being a karate, trained in karate, and also being a dancer, I'm a very kinesthetic person. Mm-hmm. So feeling the energy, I'm a feeling person. So he talked about the energy and moving in your body, and there's a whole system of meditations that are done, some physical, some inner stuff. And so he would be guiding the meditation, telling us what would be the next step, and it was already happening in my body. So it's lifelong now. Yeah, I use it every day.
So that's a tremendous gift to have, a mechanism to explore yourself and know your own mind, and not have to. The body is this thing that's going to let us down eventually. Right. It's
life is terminal.
Yeah. You've got a terminal diagnosis from the second you come out. So I kind of wanted to talk to you before we shift to your journey as a healer. Talk to you about your relationship with death. It seems like you've got a pretty hip worldview. Do you mind talking about death and how you feel about it?
No, not at all. In our American culture, we tend to pull back and shy from it. And, we just all need to realize life is terminal, and we need to make the best of what we've got, as far as an afterlife or whatever. Chia talks about the mother and the father, and you honor the mother first, and drawing earth energy up, that's the mother energy, and father energy, the sun energy down, and the blending of that mother and father, which, as we know, in all human beings come from egg and sperm. So that's the union of that creates our life. So I definitely, acknowledge that and talk about that, but I don't know if it's true or not, and, I, coming here, I have a little chant that I learned from my friend Charlie Seltzer, who was one of the collaborators with us with the American Dance Society. And the chant goes like this: "Hey, squat, find me a spot." So I have the gods, and nature gods, and hugging trees, and the spirit, and right. So what I say, on those dating sites, so you're spiritual but not religious. Yeah, so right. I'm spiritual but not religious. Fair but enough. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly valid. That's the most honest thing a person can say is who. Yeah. Right. Who knows? And it's not me. Who knows? I don't. Right. Yeah. So you don't have reservations or qualms or worries about the idea of being dead forever. It doesn't bother you.
I used to, because we were raised Catholic, the whole concept of eternity freaked me out. It definitely freaked me out. But, at points I've been like, let me go. Let it be over. I've had enough. Haven't I given enough? When the world situation, it can get you down.
Sure.
So, and I probably, like many people in my 20s, had depression, and even, some wishing I would die. Not that I had suicidal ideation, but, just wishing that I could be gone, that this would be over.
Right.
So yeah, it's a complex situation.
No, I can empathize with that a lot. I remember once watching an Alka-Seltzer dissolve in a cup and thought, man, lucky bastard, lucky devil. Look at you, just
right.
Because I too am a nearly fully recovered Catholic, and eternity freaked me out too. The idea of it whether it was heaven or hell, anything indefinite is just too much. It's just too much.
Yeah.
So I get that. And your calm with it is, I mean, it's inspiring. It's comforting to me to hear somebody has, especially someone who, I mean, to be paralyzed by a thing is to nearly die. You came very close to meeting your demise.
Yeah.
And did you come away with a different sense of the idea of death then, or has it been over time?
Well, a friend of mine who is psychic, whatever that means, she said that there was a whole board meeting in the etheric world about whether I should live or die. And I guess the vote for me to live was what
they won.
They got the majority, and I came back. So, living or dying, that after I recovered and realized that I wasn't going to be able to be a dancer anymore, I was living my dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was my dream life. I was in a dance company, and that was taken away from me. Very like that, just gone. So in that situation, people can either crumble under it and be crushed, or they can rise up like a phoenix and create a new life. So that's where I say that I felt there was a lot of grace because I didn't go into despair. I mean, when I was a dancer, one of the people who came and took classes with us, she was a very beautiful woman, and she had been in a disabling accident in terms of her face was really cut up and she was scarred and marred. And so for her, she was crushed by it. And maybe if that had happened to me, I would have been crushed. I don't know. One urologist said, "Oh, well, you'll just wear bangs, because of the scars." There are some pictures where there are very purple, very evident scars that I have of myself. So it's just how you take it. And I'm very grateful that I did have that sense of grace and that I would, and friends really helped.
Right.
My college roommate, Lynn Fetterman, she was, she came and she was really by my side, and her father was an attorney, got me set up with an attorney. Another woman who was affiliated with a dance company was an attorney, and so helped me get some money from the instability of these vans that contributed to my injuries. So, and then I decided to become a healer. At that point, if you're okay switching to that mode.
I'm so glad you did. That's the segue I was looking for. You're so good at this.
So what was I going to do with my life if I couldn't be a dancer? And when I was a dancer, I had been helped by a chiropractor with some neck and sacroiliac problems. So, and I didn't like medical doctors. I mean, they saved my life, but I didn't like that whole mode of, it was kind of like being a Catholic, right? You surrender your body to a doctor and the doctor tells you what to do. F that, not my style. So, because I'd been helped by a chiropractor, and I also had, since I was 17 years old, a deep interest in nutrition. There were Rodale's, Prevention Magazine and stuff, and I used to coach people in my dance community about, herbs to take and things like that. So I wanted to marry my interest in nutrition with a chiropractic degree, chiropractic practice. And, years later, when you're in business for yourself, you have to be an entrepreneur. And one of my business coaches asked for us to, just distill what is our purpose in life. And my purpose in life is to eliminate suffering and to elevate well-being. So that's my North Star. And that's what I direct all of my focus and attention to with my patients and with myself, with my injured, crippled to some degree body. I mean, there are people who are much worse than me.
Yeah.
But I apply the same things to myself that then I learn things to help myself. And that's a wonderful thing about being a healer, is that there's always something new to learn. And every person that comes to you brings a different situation that I can work with. And I found that chiropractic wasn't sufficient to address all the needs of my patients or myself, or nutrition. So I began to expand beyond that point.
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier about your 5-point path to
Bliss. Yeah, my fivefold path to bliss.
5-fold path to bliss.
Yeah. So one day I was just sitting at my bed, and you know how they say in the lingo, I got a download, right? And, you know, not everybody's interested in bliss, but I am. So what I first realized is, in order to have bliss, you have to eliminate what's irritating you. I mean, that might be a messy closet. It might be, you know, something with your car. It might be your desk needs reorganizing, whatever. It might be a person in your life. And so what I tell people there is, if you can't eliminate what's irritating you, you have to learn to accept it and be comfortable with it. So that's the first step. And then the second step is to nourish yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's on many levels. We nourish ourselves, right? There's food, of course, and we want to eat good, healthy food. But there's also nourishing ourselves. Beauty is really important to me. So colors, you know, the arts, you know, I was a theater dance major, so I'm very much inspired by the arts. I have museum memberships, and I love the opera. I ushered at the opera for a long time, in the ballet, you know, the beautiful singing, you know, and also, you know, it's just a kinesthetic, you know, sensual experience that I have. So that's ways to nourish yourself with enjoying nature, reading, music, art. You know, for some people, it might be coding, you know. Right. That can get you into a meditative state as well. Mine tends to be more in the artistic realm, but, you know, whatever nourishes you. And then there's accepting yourself. So another way that I place that is to get comfortable in your body, and particularly for women, and I know men, my brother was very vain, that we have a lot of judgment about our bodies. And, you know, if we don't fit the model of what's the best in our, you know, cultural experience, then we get down on ourselves and we hate ourselves. And, you know, a chiropractic friend of mine, her tricep muscle droops. She calls them her mahjong arms, and she hates them. You know, and that's, to hate something in your body, it's self-destructive. So there's that, to get comfortable in your body. The fourth step is to use your natural resources. And that could be your smile. When we smile, we actually produce happy hormones in our body, and it causes circulation to increase, and it causes digestion to improve. So we get better nourishment, going back to step 2, from the foods that we eat, but also our heart. And not everybody has experienced love, but most of us do have some type of experience or relationship with love. So when we experience love, that also nourishes our body. It creates a specific, all these states, smiling, love, they're biochemical states. So they're both neurologic firings happen in our nervous system when we're in either a negative state or a positive state. And it's also chemical. Hormones are produced, you know, and that is instantaneous. It's an instantaneous thing. They're called humoral cascade of experiences. So, you know, we can't always change what happens to us, like this accident, you know, and some people say, I chose it, right? You know, maybe that's true. But we can change how we relate to it. So that's all in that, loving part. And then the third part, so this is ABC in Use Your Natural Resources. And the third part is your sexuality. And I learned through the Taoist work how to use sexual energy to enliven and to nourish and to heal my own body, and to create relationship with partner. But there's also, so Master Chia taught single cultivation, if you don't have a partner, and dual cultivation of using the sexual energy in your body as a resource for being able to get through your day with power and energy. And then the final one, the golden rule is to love others as you love yourself. Well, I say love yourself and love others, because there's also a lot of self-criticism that people have that brings them down. So loving yourself as well as loving others is the fifth step to the fivefold path to bliss. Yeah.
Well, 4 out of 5, it ain't bad. I can see that it all makes sense. It all reads to me as, at least, what did you say? Maybe it's not true, but it feels right.
Yeah.
It feels right to me.
Yeah.
Self-love is a tough one.
Yeah.
It really is, because it's interesting. I mean, I know this isn't news, but I will say things to myself that I would never say to anyone.
Yeah.
I've never said the sort of things that I've said to myself to another person.
Right.
I mean, even as angry as I've ever been, I don't know that I've ever. And it's such a strange thing to do,
So the thing to ask yourself is, where does that come from?
Mm-hmm.
And generally it comes from clergymen, from teachers, from parents, from, in middle school years, kids are very cruel. Usually that conditioning comes from someplace else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good to look at that.
It's also, to me, it's very good to look at people who have overcome. Your example to me is tremendous. That you've faced true difficulty, but you've also been able to witness the difficulties of others and learn from them.
Yeah.
I grew up with a hospice nurse. My mom is a hospice nurse, and deeply loving and empathetic. And she nearly died when she was very young.
Wow.
And when she started doing her clinical rounds, she asked her preceptor, like, hey, I'm not complaining, but how come I'm always getting I always get the patient who's not going to make it? She said, you're just not afraid to talk to them. You just don't act afraid around these people, and everyone else does. And I think it's natural. A lot of people don't know how to deal with the dying or someone in pain or whatever it is,
Yeah.
And my mom just had a natural predilection, and I think it was a sympathy, an empathy and a sympathy with that near death sort of mindset and what's happening. And it allowed her to pursue that career. She felt, okay, well, that makes sense. I can be useful here. And it sounds very similar to what...
Yeah, she wanted to be useful. She was a server like me.
Yeah. And just, she, in contrast, you knew from the time she was like 4 that she wanted to be a nurse.
Wow.
I just was like dead set on that and did it. But she would say something similar to what you said, that her patients were teaching her. And you seem to have learned a lot from your patients. But the story you told me about the lady on the L crutches and that's what a teacher that is, to contextualize your own suffering and to the things you should be grateful for.
And also just to mention that some people are an example of how I don't want to be.
Sure.
That's also a big lesson in learning and teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what a heavy but beautiful story you have, that you've been, and now you've been a chiropractor for how long? You've been at it for
42 years.
42 years. And
actually, is that right? 43 years.
43
now.
years.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. So, because I met you at one meeting, and the next day I saw you at another meeting, and that was specifically involving the senior community.
Right.
And your brand of chiropractic lends itself very well to the senior population.
Yeah, no cracking.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So there are there are over 300 different chiropractic techniques. And each licensed chiropractic school has to teach 4 of them. And I was very interested in ones that didn't involve a lot of x-rays and didn't do cracking. I didn't want my body to be cracked a lot. You can imagine why.
Yeah.
So at one point in chiropractic school, I didn't have a day off for 2 months because I was going to so many weekend seminars. I called them the technique mongers. So these men, they were all men that had developed these different chiropractic techniques, would come sweep down into the city and give seminars for doctors in the area as well as students. And as a student, I could go to one of these seminars for $25 and doctors were paying $125. So back in 1970, where was I? 78 to 81 was a time that I was in chiropractic school. That was a lot of money. So I thought, take advantage of it now while you can, while it's cheap. So I learned from the masters in chiropractic and have developed my own technique. So my focus, I do a technique called applied kinesiology, which uses a lot of muscle testing, just testing a muscle, touching points on the body, seeing where the problem is. It's the way my patients' bodies communicate with me, also by just looking at their posture. In Chinese medicine, different muscles are related to different meridians, which are related to different organs and glands. And so I use all of that diagnostic looking at my patients when I'm analyzing them for how to help them get out of the problems that they've come to me for. So that's one branch of what I do for people. So my concept of the kind of care that I deliver is, here's Health Haven. So this is where everything's good. Maybe not good, but you're okay. Right. You're comfortable. Nothing's complaining. And then there are forces which pull you away from that sphere of Health Haven, and those are in the structural realm. For me, the extreme example of crashing through a windshield. But, we've got ergonomics. We're all got our tech neck now. That's creating quite a problem. So posture is an issue. So all motor vehicle accidents, bicycle accidents, birth trauma, those all are in the structural realm that take us away from Health Haven. Then in the biochemical realm, there's 1,000, I wrote a book, Internal Cleansing, and there's 1,000 different chemicals, man-made chemicals that are produced every year that human bodies have no understanding of how to deal with. And so it's compiled one on top of the other year after year after year. And did you know that the way that a chemical is decided it's safe is by the company that created it saying that it's safe? I mean, it's just a joke in our society. So there's toxics in that realm that take us away from Health Haven. But there's also, when people are stressed out when they're eating, and they're breathing high and shallow in their chest instead of breathing in their stomach and being relaxed when they're eating, that causes a stoppage of our digestive enzymes. So proteins putrefy, carbohydrates ferment, and fats rancidify. So that's an internal kind of toxicity that can come into our body. So that in the biochemical realm is another of the stressors that pulls us away. And then in the mental, emotional, and spiritual realm, this negative self-talk that you confess to yourself, that's in that realm, stressing people out. And all the negative messages that we get from the world about who we are and what we do, especially if we're, a rebel. That creates problems. And then abuse. 1 out of 4 women have been sexually abused. It happens to men too at a lesser frequency. That damages your neurology. It damages your sense of safety in the world. So this creates a lot of stress in that realm. Or if you have a spouse that you're bickering with, or employer that's harassing you, there's just so many. And then not knowing what your purpose is in life. So many people just feel lost. People that commit suicide, obviously they don't know what their purpose is in life. They've given up and they're taking their own life. And then in the electromagnetic realm, and this is something that is increasingly a problem. We have high tension wires. We have satellites all over the place. In just the last 10 years, we're exposed to a quintillion times more radiation than we were just 10 years ago. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't hear it, but it's there and it's creating damage to our human bodies. Plus, the Earth's magnetic poles are shifting. And this changes the Schumann frequency, which is energy from the Earth's magnetic core, and from storms that feeds us. We're actually a part of this whole planetary system. We can't separate ourselves from it. So that's causing damage to our health. So I have solutions in all of those 4 realms to bring people back to Health Haven.
Wow. What is a session like in your office? It sounds extremely dynamic.
Yeah. So when people come in, first listening, you know, and patients tell me that I listen more than any doctor they've ever been to. And I touch them, you know, with their permission. So most doctors are sitting at their keyboards, barely even looking at their patients. I think there's a trend now with younger doctors shifting that, and they've got people who are taking the notes for them so that they can interact with their patients, which I think is a big plus.
Yeah.
So physical contact, you know, that comfort. And some patients, one of the things that I do for healing is trauma healing. I studied Peter Levine's somatic experiencing. And so some people have been so damaged and abused in their body that they can't be touched. So I also offer care for them without touch. But so somebody comes in, I listen, I get their history, and then I do an examination. So I start with a postural evaluation. Like I told you, different muscles are related. So somebody might have a high shoulder, and that could relate to a weakness in their latissimus dorsi muscle, which is related in Chinese medicine to the spleen and pancreas. And we're a high sugar culture. So we're damaging our pancreases, and that can lead to a weakness of the latissimus dorsi, which the latissimus dorsi goes from your shoulder down to your back. So that can contribute to back pain. So I'm getting information from how their body is presented to me. And then I might palpate their organs. So that's just pressing in and seeing if there's any point tenderness. You know, doctors always say, on what does that hurt? A scale of 0 to 10. So, you know, you get that. And then you find out, well, maybe there's an organ or gland that's deficient. Or from their history, you might find out that they can't fall asleep at night. So that means their cortisol levels might be too high at night. So we need to help them to get the cortisol levels down. So it all comes from physical examination, muscle testing, and listening to the patient. But also there are some tests that I do. I have a heavy metal test kit, and something that I've recently learned relative to myself is oxalates, the superfood toxin book by Sally Norton. So as I begin to learn, I have more ability to reach my patients with what's going on with them.
It just sounds to me like a tremendous amount of passion. Like you definitely picked the right calling. I mean, I'm sure you were an amazing dancer, no doubt, but I can't imagine the equivalent of a dancer having this impact on people.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people get a lot of joy out of dance and out of music and out of performance. I know I have. I love reading a book, but boy, the sort of things that you do for people, and you've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And what a gift.
Fulfilling my purpose.
Yeah.
Yep.
What a gift that a horrible accident gave you.
Yeah.
And that perspective. Well, I'm glad we're neighbors. I'm glad I met you, and I'm glad you're here to share your story.
Yeah. Thanks for this opportunity.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you.